suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Saturday night, coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where we are streaming from. Now, I do come to you with both exciting news and sad news or unfortunate news, depending on where your allegiances do fall, because there's some bad injury news at Arsenal. But also, there is some very, very good news from the world of Uganda. So we'll be getting to that in tonight's broadcast. So make sure you do not miss out on a single minute of this broadcast. It's going to be loaded with a lot. But before we proceed any further, allow me have our audios tested. Make sure everything does check out before we, we'll proceed any further to the extent of tonight's broadcast. Otherwise, it's good to be back. It's always a pleasure to be back, and tonight is one of those other nights. Looks like our audios are fine. Just waiting for you guys to join. We'll be speaking about the World Cup under 17. We'll be getting updates from there. We'll talk about the World Cup qualifiers. We'll talk about friendlies that have gone, in perhaps not the most ideal way, but in some form or shape that they ought to be appreciated for what they are, for the way they may have gone down. So there's that. So, like I said, plenty for us to discuss in tonight's episode, in tonight's broadcast. For those of you that do not mind, joining us for the conversation tonight. I want to say thank you so much to all our new subscribers, those that have recently joined the channel. Last I checked, we're about 2,300 or something, which is very, very impressive. But like I've told you guys, right now, our dream, our goal, our chase, our objective is to hit those numbers of 4,000 hours of watch time. So that's the primary objective. That's what what we are pursuing. So any minute, any time that you dedicate to watching, an hour over time on the Football Tribe UG channel helps to contribute further to that. Let's see. Naman says, hi. Hi, Naman. Where are you joining us from? Please do let me know where you're joining us from. My name is Robert Kesakos, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. It's about 26 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. We are a bit late because our first broadcast was interrupted, so I had to cancel it and have it restarted. Hello, Namaste. Namaste. I think I would want to guess that you're from India. So thank you so much, Team India. India is one of the countries that have been the kindest to us in as far as the growth of this channel is concerned. So thank you so much, Team India. But also among other countries is Uganda, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Malaysia, UK. Thank you so much. Our usual suspects, our semi-regular suspects, and those that come once in a while. Thank you so much. We do appreciate you a great deal. I'm from India. You're from Uganda, small country called Uganda. That's how it's spelled, Uganda. Small landlocked country in the eastern part of Africa called Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. That's where I'm from. Has a very large Indian community. So, like I said, we'll be talking about the World Cup under 17, and that's where we will start from. Now, the Uganda Cubs, after stunning Senegal in the after stunning France in their final game of Group K, when they beat up against the 2001 champions France by a goal to nil, that goal scored by James Boguere, which saw them advance to the round of 32. We thought that was history making in itself. But now they made it even better. Against all the odds, they did beat all the odds to beat up against Senegal, who had yet to concede a goal in the tournament, by a goal to nil in the 15th minute. That goal being scored by Abubakari Walusimbi, shot 8, I think, there for the Uganda Cubs. Now, yesterday, I was having an interview with my comrade, Aldrin Nsubuga Senior. And to be honest, he, like most, I myself inclusive, did not give the Uganda Cubs much of a chance we thought they did not stand much of a chance against a team that were defensively solid. The only team that had yet to concede a goal in as far as the tournament is concerned. J. Shari Ram, my Indian god J. Shari Ram. Okay, that's noted. Naman, thank you. So, I was speaking to Audrey in that interview yesterday. It went live yesterday night. And for those of you that have managed to catch it, thank you so much for taking the time to watch that 1 hour and 12 minutes interview. So he was speaking about the Uganda Cubs, what they've been able to do. Of course, it's very exciting. They are young players, and everything that they do that is right is bound to excite us, is bound to leave a long-lasting impact. I think I wouldn't say that I followed the Uganda Cubs that much, but I do remember back in 2014 when they played the Junior Kipolo Polo of Zambia at Nachivuo Stadium, that team that had the likes of Muhammad Shaban then at the time, because at that time I was actively writing sports news. So, and fast forward, you come to them making history by qualifying for their very first ever World Cup. Remember, they had to go through the playoffs in which they beat up against Gambia by 2-1 to get to this stage. Now, when we were at the group stage, of course, they lost their first game against Canada by 2-1, went and drew against Chile in a 1-1 draw. And then we thought their chances of going past the group stages were sort of had been really, really dented because of that draw against Chile, So, but they surprised us all, and they beat up against France by 1-0. So they advanced for the round of 32, and they got pitted against arguably one of the strongest sides there has been in the tournament, possibly one of Africa's, favorites to go much further in the pursuit for glory in the Under-17 World Cup that is being played over there in Qatar. Now, Uganda has been impressing the world both on and off the pitch. Off the pitch, the fans, the Uganda Cubs fans or the Ugandan fans have been scintillating, have been really electric in their support of the Cubs. They've been out there drumming. I was earlier on today engaging in a conversation on X, and when we were watching, I think, an episode of a section of fans drumming and jamming, bringing all the supportive vibes to the crowd. And my question was, how did we get our local drums over there? Because they seem to be making the rounds, and it's beautiful to watch. The fans have been really, really incredible. You know how they say that the 12th man is very, very important, and that 12th man in the game of football is always the fan. Yes, they've been that and even more. So thank you so much to the Ugandan fans, to the Uganda Cubs fans that have been there overseas in Qatar watching this World Cup, that will continue to follow the team. Today, they've beaten up against the Senegalese team with which they have been sharing the same hotel, or they've been sitting in the same dining areas for their meals. So that's how close the two sides have been. And like I said, going into this particular fixture, a man who knows about football, perhaps by a mile more than I do in Aldrin Soga Senior, he did say he did not have high hopes, about the Uganda Cubs. He, at least by his own measure of analysis and prediction, he thought their journey was going to come to an end. But alas, we have all been stunned as they beat up against Senegal by 1-0. Now, Wallo Simbi may have been the goal scorer, may have stolen the headlines in some form or shape. But for me, the best player on the pitch was the goalkeeper. The Uganda Cubs goalkeeper, Idrissa Waibi, was nothing short of immaculate. He was giving Dennis Masinde Onyango, prime Dennis Masinde Onyango vibes out there. He made save after save. For those of you that do not relate so much to African football, the comparison I can draw for you in quick reference or in the recent past, go back and watch the game between Liverpool and Real Madrid that Liverpool won by 1-0. Look at the number of saves and the quality of saves that Thibaut Courtois made in that game. That's the picture for which you need to use to relate to what Idrissa Waibi has done today against Senegal. He pulled off save after save, even when he thought that perhaps this is the time he's going to get beat. That's when he pulled off his most decent save. And yet, whereas you thought that was going to be his best save in the game, he just pulled off another, moments later. So it's been that kind of game. And like I said, in case you're really, really interested, go catch up on the highlights from that game. You will know what I'm talking about. But I think if the Under-17 World Cup is there to showcase talent, young talent, to the rest of the world, to the academies overseas that have this sort of, that are looking for this kind of untapped into talent, particularly from Africa and from all over the world. Because if, let's say, you're an academy like West Ham, like Arsenal, like Southampton, or whichever the academy is, you're looking to tap into that talent that is being showcased at the Under-17 World Cup. That means, because when these players are playing at the Under-17 level, that means they're a couple of, 2-3 years into senior debuts, into being ready for the next level, and even if it were to be 4 years, that, let's say, the boy is 15, the boy is 16, 4 years from now, there will be 19, there will be 20, So if you're looking at those kinds of players, I think so far we've been entertained by the Uganda Cubs and by so many other teams in this tournament. We have been really, really entertained. And I think if I want to think that if you're a scout and you've been watching the Uganda Cubs, you must have been impressed by the striker, James Bogere, who we're going to speak about in just a bit. You must have been impressed today by the goalkeeper, Edrissa YB. You must have been impressed at some level, Abubakari Walusimbi. You must have been impressed by Ijara, one of those players that I thought put on, or, has sort of had very, very good performances in as far as this tournament is concerned. So really, there's a lot to be impressed about. What is the last date of Ghana Army recruitment? I am asking for my friend. That's a bite-sized journey. I have zero idea about the Ghanaian army. So allow me not lie to you in any sense whatsoever to that effect. So anyways, like I said, very many good performers out there. A result that we did not expect. Senegal applied all the pressure that you would expect to get in that kind of game, but they could not find the way through against the Uganda Cubs. They could not really find the way through against the Uganda Cubs. Somi says, hello, friend. Hello to you too. Good to have you on the broadcast. Please like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. My name is Robert Kesakos, and I'm coming to you live from Kampala, Uganda. In case you're wondering where Uganda is, Google. Unfortunately, we've been making news for all the right reasons and for the wrong reasons, depending on who is interpreting the news for you. Just call me SD. Hi, ISD. Oh, that's much better. That's much better. Much simpler. But hi to you too. And thank you for simplifying things for me. I was saying, we've been making the news. If you heard about the president who promised to attack, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, to attack his neighbors, to access the ocean, then that's the country I'm from, because that's what's been making the rounds. But we do neighbor countries like Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, Rwanda. Those are some of, and the DRC Congo, those are some of our immediate neighbors. When I say a small landlocked country in the eastern part of Africa, that's where I am from. So anyways, in the terms of the Uganda Cranes, we had, players, Edrissa YB started in goal. We had Hamza Sengova, who was the captain, Enoka Bagenda, Jovan Mukisa, Elvis Torach, Steve Oiroth, Brian Jara, you had Abubakari Walusimbi, Isma Magala, you had Richard Okello, James Bogere, and Arafat Nkola. Now, the captain, that's Hamza Sengova, was forced off early through injury. And then he had to be substituted off. So, but I thought the boys had a really, really good day out there. They played some really, really impressive football. Now, Uganda, having won that game against Senegal, to the surprise of many of us, they did book themselves a slot in the round of 16, in which they'll be facing, guess who? Burkina Faso. Now, Burkina Faso, for those of you that care to remember, were in Group I of this tournament, where you had teams like USA, teams like Czech Republic, and Tajikistan. Now, what happened in that group is that Burkina Faso lost only one game. That was against Team USA. They lost by 1-0. They beat up against Czech Republic by 2-1, and they beat up against Tajikistan by 2-0. So they've been impressive. They were impressive at the group stage. Perhaps better than the Uganda Cubs have been. Now, they came to the round of 32 and even made it better. While we Ugandans are still pondering whether we should be putting billboards across the streets of Kampala to show that the Uganda Cubs beat up against France, or to put it simply, that Uganda beat France. Well, Burkina Faso went and knocked out the reigning champions of the tournament, of this competition. Germany were the reigning champions of the Under-17 World Cup. Now, for those of you that have been, adherent followers of this channel, you remember when we were talking about favorites for this competition, and we mentioned about Germany that they did not stand out as one of the favorites because of how they had performed in the recent Euros. Now, at that same level. So I'm not surprised that they have been knocked out this early in the competition, but I'm a bit surprised that they got knocked out by Burkina Faso. It's not to say that Burkina Faso are lesser a team of than Germany, because the unfortunate thing about these competitions for Under-17 is that almost at every tournament, you have a new set of players, because the ones that played in the previous tournament have possibly surpassed that age. Now, we cannot sit here and argue about the pedigree of those respective teams. The country, let's say Brazil, who have won this competition 4 times. The country that is Nigeria, who have won this competition the most, that's 5 times. You could argue that as a country, they have the pedigree. That's as a nation. But when it comes to a particular team that represents them at each tournament, we cannot argue the kind of pedigree. Why? Because at least you could bet that possibly if this tournament is being played every 2 years, that means if the only way a player that was part of the same competition, the previous outing, gets to be part of the next competition is if they played the last edition when they were possibly 14 years. So usually, by the turn of 2 years, when we get to another edition, most of the players that had been 15 years at the time, or even 16, are now out of the window. So that means you're bringing in fresh blood. So that's why, at the basis of each team, we cannot argue the kind of pedigree. At the national level, you can argue it, but it's not within that team, So with that said, Burkina Faso came and said, oh, Germany are the reigning champions. We're going to beat them. And they beat them by 1-0 to book their spot in the round of 16, where they will be up against Uganda. Now, so many African teams have been pitted against each other. And in this particular case, having knocked out the reigning champions, by the virtue of that fact, Burkina Faso will come into that game at the round of 16 as the team to beat. Uganda will come as the team, as the David, in a David Goliath kind of fight. They will come as the underdogs. Can they use that status to upset the balance of scale? We can only hope that that will be the case. Until then, we'll have to just wait and see. Anyways, in the other results from today, in as far as the round of 32 is concerned, England knocked out South Korea, beating them by 2-0. Italy knocked out Czech Republic by beating them by 2-0. Japan thumped South Africa, beating them by 3-0. While Venezuela got out by North Korea, who beat them by 2-1. Austria knocked out Tunisia by 2-0, while Croatia got knocked out by Uzbekistan 4-3 on penalties that proceeded a 1-all draw in normal time. Now, this is the round of 16 that has been confirmed so far in terms of the fixtures that we know about. Brazil will be up against France. Those games will be played on Tuesday. Morocco will be up against Mali. Switzerland will take on Ireland. Mexico will be up against Portugal. So, in the other context of the other teams, we are still waiting, but I've told you, Uganda will be up against Burkina Faso. So, once I do have that news, we will be letting you know what the full set of those will be. Meanwhile, as we speak, the World Cup qualifiers are ongoing. Slovenia are up against Kosovo, and that game is into halftime with Kosovo leading by 1-0. Sweden and Switzerland are 1-1 at halftime, while Denmark is leading up against Belarus by 1-0, same as Greece in the 1-0 lead against Scotland. In the earlier games, you had Turkey beat up against Bulgaria by 2-0. Hakani Chanalolu scoring from the penalty spot to give Turkey the lead in the 18th minute, while Chenev scored an own goal to give Turkey their second goal. Now, in that same group, you had Spain beat up against Georgia by 4-0. Mikel Oyarzabal scored from the penalty spot to make it 1-0. And then Martin Zubimendi scored to make it 2-0, while Ferran Torres made it 3-0 in the 35th minute. And in the 63rd minute, Mikel Oyarzabal picked his second on the night to make it 4-0 as Spain wrapped up that 4-0 rout against Georgia today. That means that in 5 games played, Spain have 15 points. They've scored 19 goals. They've conceded 0 goals, 0 draws, 0 losses. That's how stellar they have been in their own performances. The other team that has yet to concede a goal in this run of qualifiers is England. They've won 6 out of 7 games. They've won all their 7 games, I think, and without conceding. Norway have scored so many goals, I think as many as 33 in this competition. In the qualifiers, they've only conceded 4, giving them a goal difference of 29. In their final game of the qualifiers, they will be up against they will be up against Italy. For those of you that were part of our morning discussion today in regards to the context of the World Cup qualifiers, you know that we did discuss some of the unbecoming comments or suggestions of Gennaro Gattuso, who is the Italian national team manager. RSD is asking, which team are you going to support, though? Now, at what level are you asking? If you're talking about the World Cup under 17, obviously I'll be rooting for Uganda against Burkina Faso. If you're talking about the World Cup, unfortunately, Uganda did not qualify, so that means I'll stick to the Brazil national team, which is the team that I've always supported at the World Cup. Whenever Uganda's not qualified, of course, they have never qualified for the World Cup, to answer your question. But also, depending on who is a stronger nation, by acknowledgement of my own objectivity, I could sort of have a soft spot. For example, I had a soft spot for Spain in 2010 World Cup because I thought and I knew without an ounce of doubt that they were the best team there was at the time in the World Cup. They had just come off the back of the triumph in 2008 when they lifted the Euros. So went into the World Cup. Remember that side, they had a very scintillating Barcelona team and very, very good players from the Real Madrid cohort and a few other picks from elsewhere, the likes of Cesc Fabregas, who was still at Arsenal at the time. So very, very impressive team. So I had a soft spot for them. And when they won, I really, really felt happy for them at the end of the day when they beat up against Netherlands by 1-0 in that final, that goal scored by Iniesta with Fabregas providing the assist. Yes, you clarified that you meant that the under-17 World Cup, obviously Uganda. Team Uganda is what I'll be rooting for. I do not know where you're joining us from. I do not want to guess because I may get that one wrong. But do let me know what country you yourself will be rooting for in as far as the round of 16 is concerned for the World Cup under 17. Anyways, I think before we conclude on the World Cup under 17, the one thing that I had forgotten to mention about Uganda is that they will be without their striker James Bogere, who has been one of their standout performers, following a yellow card that he received today. So he's accumulated the yellow cards that get to have him sit out a game, so he won't be in action in their game against Burkina Faso at the round of 16. They will have to look elsewhere for goals and for a man who can lead their lines in as far as the striking role is concerned. So we will wait and see how Brian Senyondo, who is the head coach for Uganda at the Under 17 World Cup, will assemble his team when that time comes. Possibly, I'm thinking those fixtures could be played on Wednesday next week. Anyways, let's move on from the World Cup under 17 and go to the other spheres still of the World Cup qualifiers or the international break within its context. Now, today we did receive news that Riccardo Calafiori had left the Italian national team camp to return to the UK or to Arsenal, to London Colony, to be assessed further following his hip injury. Now, for purposes of context, here's what happened. In Arsenal's last game before the international break, in their 2-2 draw against Sunderland, Riccardo Calafiori sustained a hip injury. Now, they informed the Italian national team, but like I told you previously, because of the mistrust that lays between clubs and respective national team federations or national teams, they always think that clubs try to manufacture injuries to forbid players from linking up with their respective national teams, in other words, to preserve them for self-preservation. Because they did not believe that, they summoned Riccardo Calafiori, or had already been summoned, and chose not to replace him in the squad. They went on to assess him. Their own national team doctors acknowledged that, yes, he does have a hip injury. They had hoped that he would recover in time to be part of their game against Norway, which comes up next week. Now, that has not been the case because it does appear that the problem is not going away just yet. So, according to Fabrizio Romano, he did reveal that Riccardo Calafiori had returned to the UK for further assessment. He said, and I quote, Riccardo Calafiori has left Italy camp today and returns to London to be assessed by Arsenal staff. He tried to be available, but he can't force now. That was Gennaro Gattuso saying about Riccardo Calafiori. Like I said, their hope was that he would be fit or he would have recovered by the time they get to play Norway. Unfortunately for them, that has not been the case. That has not been the case. And the implication of that is that they'll miss him. He's a very, very good player. He's that good a player that they would have loved to have him they would have loved to have him available, So I think those games will be played possibly, I think, on Monday. Should it be Monday? I stand to be corrected. Maybe Monday or Tuesday. I'm trying to find out exactly when Italy's fixture is going to be. Actually, no. Italy play tomorrow, Sunday. Yes, they will be in action tomorrow on Sunday against Norway. Remember, Norway are leading that Group I. They've been the best team in that pool. Now, in the work that he's not recovered on time to play against Norway, I always thought it was going to be a huge risk because, in my opinion, I thought that even if they thought he had recovered, playing him was going to always be a very, very huge risk. One that would have possibly exacerbated his injury because you see, an injury of an athlete is more like a burn wound. It can heal, but it does leave a scar. So in some cases, if that's not the case, in comparison, you can also look at it this way. If you ever gone to gym or you've ever exercised, for the first time, you do some rigorous exercises for the first time in a long while, what you will experience will be a lot of fatigue will be a lot of muscular pain. Now, that muscular pain goes away in a couple of days, maybe a week. But just because it's gone away does not mean that you're back to the stage where you were at before you did the rigorous exercise, because it's a process. In other words, your healing process continues as you do back-to-back exercising. So similarly, for some of these injuries, just because a player feels okay does not mean that it cannot snap in just a bit. That is a huge possibility. And that would have been a huge risk that he would have been taking, featuring for Italy. So now that they have come to the realization it's not going to be the case, he's returned to Arsenal, he's going to be assessed. My worry or suspicion is that he may not recover on time to be part of Arsenal's Big London Derby on Super Sunday. That's on, I think, November 23rd or 22nd. November 23rd, yes. That will be the Sunday in which Arsenal will take on Tottenham Hotspur. So, and yet I think it will be a huge, huge miss for Arsenal in regards to how they've been applying themselves, particularly this season. We know how influential he has been in that starting 11 for the Gunners. He's been a mainstay at that left back role. Now, the advantage for Arsenal is that they do have options in that role. However, none of those options play the way Ricardo Calafiori applies himself, because all players do apply themselves differently. They have Piero Hincap, the Ecuadorian, who is also away for international duty. They have Miles Lewis Kelly, who was not someone to the England national team. And Thomas Tuchel came out to say that he needs more playing time if he wants to guarantee his slot ahead of the FIFA World Cup 2026. And for what we felt is a bit of a gaslighting for a 19-year-old who you're trying to make think that if he goes away from Arsenal, then he will guarantee himself playing time and probably he gets into the team. Now, if that were to happen, 12 things can happen. You could go to a team and you do not thrive. That wouldn't make you a bad player. It would only mean that you have failed to adapt quickly to the new environment within which you've been applied. Whereas with Arsenal, he already understands what the environment is. And that's why, even if he doesn't play week in, week out, every time he's called upon, you can hardly fault him. He's already playing in a system that he knows one too well. So that's to his advantage. So should it be the case that by the time we get to Super Sunday on November 2023, that Arsenal's Ricardo Calafiori will have not recovered on time, and even perhaps ahead of the crucial game against Bayern Munich in the UEFA Champions League that will come subsequent to that game. I think it will be a Wednesday the 27th? No, Wednesday the 25th. Hi, Kakoza. Kato Ponciano Kakoza. How are you doing, my brother? Good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. My Kakoza, your name sounds every little bit Ugandan. I hope you're Ugandan. And I would be interested in knowing where you're joining us from. But thank you so much. So, should it be the case that they will be without Ricardo Calafiori for that game against Tottenham Hotspurs and possibly for the home game against Bayern Munich in the UEFA Champions League that will come subsequent to the fixture against Tottenham Hotspurs, which for them will be away from home, while the game against Bayern Munich will be at the Emirates Stadium. They do have cover. However, within that very cover, they will be hoping and praying that Piero Hincap does not return to the club with an injury, because as we have seen one too many times, players tend to return after the international break with injuries. It's happened to players like Rodri before. It's happened to players like Martin Odegaard. It's happened to players like Ricardo Calafiori himself, and so many others. Examples that you may want to call on to there. Kakoza says, yes, I am a Ugandan from Luwero, Bamunanika. Oh, wow. Very, very interesting. Luwero, Bamunanika. What part of Luwero do I know? Apart from Wobulenzi, I'm not so familiar with the ins and outs of Luwero. But one thing I know about Luwero is that they do produce very, very tasty pineapples. So thank you so much, my brother, for joining us. I hope you've subscribed to the channel. I hope you've liked the broadcast. But also, more importantly, tell us, what team do you support? Whether it's club level, whether it's a country, when it comes to the World Cup and things like that. So, anyways, now, while Arsenal were still worrying or concerning themselves about the situation with Ricardo Calafiori, just this evening, they got some very unsettling news. And that is to do with Kakoza's question. The injury to Gabriel Magahlaes, one of the best centre-backs there is in the Premier League, and possibly there is in the world at this moment. Now, guys, let's not confuse the two. Not of all time, not in the last 10 years, not in the recent past, but in present day, present continuous tense. He is one of the very best there is for a centre-back across world football. Now, Brazil were in an international friendly game against Senegal that was being played at Wembley, and he was withdrawn off around the 60th minute through an injury. Initially, it had been thought to be a muscular injury, but latest reports have shown that Brazil have confirmed that he has suffered a groin injury. Now, I do not know the extent of the groin injury, but we know it's an injury that can keep out a player for a good number of weeks. That's the honest bit. It can keep out a good player for a good number of weeks. And in this particular case, we do not know how long that will be. For those of you that want quick reference in regards to a groin injury, that is what Alexander Isak, I think, was struggling with at Liverpool. I saw Graham Potter, the Sweden national team manager, saying he had recovered and will be available for the next game. However, they will try to manage his minutes. Two, the other example I can draw to is Chelsea's Cole Palmer. He did suffer that, a similar injury. He struggled with the groin. And it's, for those of you that are Chelsea fans or Premier League fans in general, you may have noticed how long he's been out. I think ever since their 2-1 loss against Man United, he's never played for Chelsea again. In between there, they played games in the UEFA Champions League. They played other Premier League games, including against Nottingham Forest, which a game they won by 3-0, including losing to Sunderland by 2-1, including their last outing in which they won. I remember that game. I'm trying to recollect exactly what the final result was from match day 10. From match day 10 for Chelsea. Chelsea's match day 10. Match day 11. Match day 11. They won that game against Wolverhampton Wanderers by 3-0. So clearly, if it is very serious, it can keep him out for a period of about 3 weeks. It could go to 4 weeks, depending on the severity of the injury itself. So at this stage, we do not know for sure. all we know, he will be returning to Arsenal. Of course, he's already within London, but he will be going to the Arsenal medical team to assess him further to assess the severity of that injury. Now, that in itself is very, very troubling news. Why? First of all, the timing of the injury. In the context of the kinds of fixtures that Arsenal have coming up next, I think is very critical or very concerning. But also, when you look at the other factors other than the timing or the next fixtures, one, the injury comes at a time when they have doubts for Ricardo Calafiori through injury. The injury comes at a time when you've just replaced, you've just had the likes of Ben White return from injury. Now, like I've said, they do have options in terms of numbers, but then the question becomes, given that some of these players are still away on international duty, do you get them all back in one piece? There's no guarantees to that. There's no guarantee that Pierre Hincap comes back in one piece, Urian Timber comes back in one piece. There's no guarantees to that. So, and then in the context of the upcoming fixtures, is that they have, like I said, they have Spurs, they have Bayern Munich, they have Chelsea, they have Brentford, they have Aston Villa. Those are the next 5 fixtures that Arsenal will have. Now, we know the magnitude of the London derby against Tottenham Hotspur. I do not need to overstate the extent of the size of the game that it is against Bayern Munich, nor do I need to state the extent of the size that it is the game of Chelsea. So, really, and then Brentford, we know how Brentford have been stubborn against the big sides. For Chelsea, you know that they forced you in a 2-all draw. You know that they beat up against Man United by 3-1. You know they beat up against Liverpool by 3-2. We know they beat up against Newcastle by 3-1. We know that Manchester City narrowly beat them by 1-0. That goal by Erling Haaland. So when you look at it in that context, in the context of the next 5 fixtures, it gets you worried. Now, Gabriel Magahlaes suffers an injury in an international friendly game against Senegal. And I know to the anguish of many Arsenal fans, particularly online, some of the comments, few comments that I've looked at or have had the chance to read about, you could sense the frustration within Arsenal fans. You could sense the disappointment. And reason being because it's an international friendly. A kind of game where they would have hoped that some of their elite players would be rested, that they wouldn't be starting these kinds of games because it's a friendly. You want to test out the other members of the squad that you think, should make it to the main squad. Every squad, national team, club, there's that core of 10, 16 players that are constants in that squad. And then you have the additionals, usually the players that would want to call the peripherals. Usually friendlies are to test that out, but also to the defense of Carlo Ancelotti, who is the manager for Brazil. He hasn't been manager for Brazil for so long because let's not forget, he only took charge of the team, I think, starting early June. And he needs to figure out what his best starting 11 is, what players have the good chemistry. So in their starting 11 was Ederson Moraes, Marquinhos, Eder Militao, Alexandro, Gabriel Magahlaes, Casemiro, Bruno Guimaraes, William Estavao, Matheus Cunha, Rodrigo Goes, and Vinicius Junior. So you could see it was a stellar lineup, in which, by the way, a game which they went on to win by 2-0 with William Estavao scoring a goal in the 28th minute, and 7 minutes later, Casemiro also scoring to make it 2-0. Just for purposes of comparison, Senegal also fielded one of their best team. They had Eduardo Mendy in goal, Kalidou Koulibaly, Ismail Jacobs, Antoine Mendy, Moussa Nkieta. They had Sadio Mane in there. They had Pape Gueye. They had Idris Gana Gueye. They had Pape Matsa, who also was withdrawn at the start of the second half possibly through injury. They had Ilman Ndiaye from Everton, and then Ismail Sarr from Crystal Palace. So they also fielded arguably their best team for for Theo there representing the Senegalese national team. So while for the Arsenal fans, I'll understand the anguish, you also have to understand what managers on the other side are all about. Anyways, Kakoza says he does support Vipers SFC. Actually, it's called Vipers SC, Vipers Sports Club. And then he says Brazil. Then Bengo. Oh, Bengo, a woman FC from Indian League, and Arsenal FC. So he does. I think we do share some commonalities there with Kato Kakoza. We both support the Brazil national team. We do both pay allegiance to Arsenal, although my allegiance is to football first. So I love football first, and then clubs country comes second. So then when it comes to the Uganda Premier League, I used to support Sports Club Villa. And that word used, I use it intentionally because ever since that period, 2012, 2013, when the league was in shambles, you had, FIFA Super League, you had Super League Limited, whatever the fights were, that's where sort of the morale for Villa really, really went down. But it's a team that I used to pay allegiance to. Anyways, Musa to come says hi Musa, good to have you join us. Kindly like the podcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. Do let us know where you're joining us from on this beautiful Saturday night. Please do not forget, we do come live every single day, Monday to Monday at 11 p.m. East African time. Besides, only on Fridays do we have a change of schedule. Friday nights, we do our broadcasts usually between 9 and 10. That's for Friday nights. And also, we do come to you live every single morning, Monday to Friday at 9 a.m. And then on Saturday, we do come around 10, 11, usually 11 these days. So do not miss out on all those live broadcasts. Every single day of the week, at least, we are live. But Monday to Saturday, we are live morning and evening at the respective times. The easy way to do it, turn your notifications on and you'll be notified once we do go live. And then on Sunday, we do not do a morning live. We only do at night. So please take note of that as well. So we're still talking about Gabriel Magahlaes and the frustration with Arsenal fans. I do understand completely where their frustration is coming from. But in the context of that, is the fact that Arsenal will be really, really worried. Because like I said, Gabriel Magahlaes is one of their best players, one of their most impactful players in that squad. When it comes to their defending, when it comes to their team organization at the back, when it comes to their set piece plays, he's very, very crucial in all those things. And given that he's out through injury, spells a bit of doom in a month that is often dubbed as Black November for Arsenal. And I've told you the magnitude or the size of fixtures or the size of opponents with whom they will be up against during the course of this period. So it doesn't make it any easier. However, Arsenal fans will also take solace in knowing they have options. So in the absence of Gabriel Magahlaes, who gets to be played at the left central midfield, at the left centre back, do you go with Piero Hincap, who was signed as the de facto replacement for Jakub Kiwior? Because unfortunately for them, with Ricardo Calafiori out, that means they can't play Ricardo Calafiori as the left-sided center back. So that in itself is out of the window. That in itself is out of the window. JFT says hello, sup. Hi JFT, good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel and help support Football Tribe grow. Also do let us know where you're joining us from, what team do you support, and which team do you pay allegiance to, where is your weak eye. So now Pierre Hincap has never played alongside William Saliba as a defensive partnership, and against Spurs or Bayern Munich or Chelsea wouldn't be the most ideal of games for Mikel Arteta to try that out. But unfortunately, his hands may be tied, because given the pain you saw on his face, if you were to read his facial expression, Gabriel Magahlaes, as he walked off that pitch, you could see the pain within his face. Not particularly for the injury, but particularly for what it means to his team. So there's two kinds of pains. The pain of the injury itself. But what I was reading off his face was what that injury means to the context of his club. The games that are upcoming, which he knows one too well. Two, he knows that his team will miss his leadership if he's to be absent, even if it's for one game. And I do not know. I do not want to be a prophet of doom and gloom. But certainly, I'm not convinced that he will only miss one game. I'm not convinced so. Chances are that, again, if his facial expression is anything to go by, it's probably going to be at least 2 weeks on the sideline. At least 2 weeks. That means absent against Spurs, against Bayern Munich, against Chelsea, against and possibly against Brentford. Because that Brentford game will come, I think, on the 3rd of December. It will be a midweek game. So let's hope for the best, but also assume the worst. Now, the other potential replacements is Christian Mosquera. Now, we saw in the game against Newcastle, where Christian Mosquera started alongside Gabriel Magahlaes, and he sort of struggled to settle in that game. It's not to say he's a bad defender. It's to say that he's a very, very capable player, as we saw him play at Anfield and elsewhere. He's a very, very capable player. But like I said, coming up against Tottenham, against Bayern Munich and Chelsea, can be a daunting task for a young player of 21 years of age in Christian Mosquera. Then what are the other options for us? In terms of centre-backs, there are plenty of those. Timber is a centre-back, or can play as a centre-back. Ben White can play as a centre-back, but you feel that none of those players is going to offer what Gabriel Magahlaes does offer. Because for Gabriel Magahlaes, he comes with that sort of seniority. He comes with that leadership, that team organization at the back. But more importantly, he comes with the threat, the effect, the impact of a set-piece play that he does offer. It's brilliant to watch. It's always brilliant to watch. Gabriel Magahlaes, the way he attacks those corner kicks. Remember the goal against Newcastle? Almost a last-minute winner at St. James's Park this season. That's the impact of Gabriel Magahlaes. That's how it is. So, unlike, we do not know what will happen with the other Arsenal players that are still on international duty. Bukayo Saka with the England national team, Ebeleche Eze and Declan Rice with the England national team, and the many others out there with their respective teams. We can only hope. First of all, again to remind you about the context within why this is a big worry for Arsenal is that they've already been contending with so many injuries. Gabriel Martinelli, Gabriel Jesus, Kai Havertz, Noni Madueke, Martin Odegaard, they've all been out through injury. They've all been out through injury. And adding another set of two to those, whose return is highly anticipated to be after the international break, but has no guarantees to that, I think is a worrying sign. First of all, for Noni Madueke, it was a knee injury, so you do not want to rush him in. Gabriel Martinelli, you wouldn't want to rush him. Gabriel Jesus, need I have to say, having suffered an anterior cruciate ligament injury, you do not want to rush him. Kai Havertz, it was a knee injury. So all injuries are delicate in their own nature. But I think we can all agree that knee injuries and ankle injuries are very, very sensitive for a footballer. Very, very sensitive for a footballer. More than perhaps any other injury in the terms of their career, you know. So, and perhaps the hamstring or the groin, depending on severity. We know that players last season, some players needed surgery for their hamstrings. So this season, it's been one injury after the other for Arsenal. They've managed to cope well without some of their biggest players. And yet, the piling does continue. Hey, SD, what's up, my brother? So, that's the unfortunate news for the Arsenal fans. It's a groin injury. It's one that he walked with a slight limp in his walk as he walked off the pitch, and we will have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. We will have to wait and hear from Mikel Arteta, possibly next week on Friday in his pre-match press conference towards the London Derby, but it has been confirmed. And according to Sky Sports News, this is just coming in from a couple of minutes ago, that according to Sky Sports News, Gabriel Magahlaes warmed up separately from the rest of the Brazil squad in yesterday's training session as they tried to manage his load. They tried to manage his load, yet they started him in a pointless friendly game. Now, that last line is from a frustrated Arsenal fan. Now, if you had a player trained by himself, why? Because whatever the reason may have been, why start him in a game that is less impactful or of little impact in terms of results for your team? Because of the recent injuries that Arsenal have suffered, they've tried to be as cautious, as precautionary as possible when it comes to players with injuries. You feel a niggle, sit it out. You feel something, report to the team, report to the medical team. Let's not risk you, because we could lose you for a far longer period than you would actually have lost you. So they've really, really done their best. But unfortunately, you can never control all factors in life. You can never control all factors in life. But I think Arsenal fans will know that it's a huge dent. Now, when he got substituted off, he was bagged with ice to that thigh of his. Again, it's they're trying to cure. But let's wait and see. We'll find out soon enough the extent of the injury and how long it could be that he is out. But it does not spell out to be good news for Arsenal at whatever level you may want to come to think of it. Because when you dissect that Arsenal team, when it comes to their backline, Gabriel Magahlaes is Arsenal's backline, as is Gabriel Magahlaes, to the effect of stellar performances that he does bring to that team. We're talking about a team that has conceded 5 goals so far this season in 11 games. Very solid defensive record. Only in 1 game have they conceded 2 goals, and that was against Sunderland. But let's wait and see. I think we should move on from that. We've discussed it all. We've exhausted the impact, the meaning, the implications of those respective injuries to Arsenal. And we've discussed the Under-17 World Cup to the extent of what we know best. We can never exhaust it all with football. There's always something. And we'll have to wait and see. All I can say is it's always been a pleasure doing this with you. But like I said, to all our new community members, those that have recently subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. Those of you that dedicate your time to us, to watch what we do here, we do not take your love and support for granted. We appreciate you a great, great, great deal. So thank you so much. Like I said, every single day, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m., we come live. At night, Monday to Thursday, 11 p.m. Fridays, usually at 9 p.m. or 9:30, thereabout. And then on Saturday, we do it again. It's been a pleasure, Kato. Nice to meet you. I hope your twin, whichever the agenda is also good. Be blessed and have a blessed Sunday ahead. Bye-bye for now. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. There's no morning broadcast tomorrow. There's a late night broadcast. So do not forget to keep it locked on the Football Tribe UG channel. Bye-bye for now.